to your premise of these crises being activated coax systems. So we talked quite a bit about the coax systems, and you had mentioned that they're similar to complexes, which is they start, very early in life. And the earliest life, the pre-verbal ones, are the most strongly charged, because then that's when we're the most uncontained in our emotional expression. And these are also times where they're pre-verbal, which means we have in the memory of the experience and the sort of root of the systems, we have like no conceptual capacity to explain these things, to explicate these feelings in a way that puts them in time and place and context. They're just or something. And then you had also mentioned the sort of unique contribution of Stanislav Grof in this work to suggest that these systems, these complexes, don't start in early life. They actually start during the different phases of the birthing process, and that the birthing process itself is that same sort of pre-verbal emotional charge, etc., but at a different level of maybe expansiveness or intensity. And you made the suggestion that these states are activated coax systems where people get stuck in process, very early activated states. And in your discussion on the webinar that sort of initiated me reaching out, you discussed the role of the perinatal activation. And I'm wondering if you can, I guess what would be necessary is a little bit of a flush out about the perinatal matrices, I believe they're called, and where you see spiritual emergency, archetypal crisis as being, rooted down as far into the perinatal system.
So I was trained by Stan Grof, and I'm an admirer of his work. I think he's a great man, and he's the original LSD psychotherapist from the 1950s and 60s, and he's worked with more people in LSD psychotherapy than anybody else. I think he's personally sat for a couple of thousand sessions and supervised many others. And when he was collating his work in the early 1970s and going through his case records, he developed idea. He thought that at the root of people's issues was what he called the perinatal layer. And he wasn't the first person to have this idea, but he developed the ideas further than anyone else. And this was contrary to the ideas coming up in psychoanalysis, which considered that the baby is born with no experience of being in the womb, no experience of the birth process, and that personality development starts with the relationship with mother, the feeding relationship at the breast. But Grof felt that this was profoundly wrong, and found that there were many kind of elements of experience that relates to the perinatal process that emerged in people's experiences in expanded states. And the first part of the perinatal experience is the experience of being in the womb, of being supported in the womb, close to maternal heartbeat. It's probably pretty blissful. You're getting everything that you need in this watery environment. Sometimes it's not so blissful, a toxic wound state, especially as labor approaches. And then you get this sudden cataclysmic change as labor starts. You have a contracting uterus in the baby, and just imagine what it's like for that baby who, has very limited experience, but is subjected to these incredible forces. And that would feel like a pretty dreadful situation to be in. And there would be a sense of threat to survival. And if you can imagine, the baby at that time has got no words, no cognitions, but it feels, it would feel pretty dreadful, and you'd really feel it with your body. And then, of course, there's the journey down the birth canal, with everything that would involve. And then the expulsion into the outside world, which of course is like a death to the old world and a rebirth to the new world of bright lights. everything that goes with that. Hopefully some of the harshness of that experience can be mitigated, but often it's still a pretty harsh experience. So the main elements of that would be the transition from one state to another, the birth, the experience of death, the fundamental experience of crushing futility, of powerlessness, of incredible forces raged against you, the journey through birth canal, that life and death struggle, the forces in your body, emergence in a new world. So you can just imagine. So you can just imagine the enormity of that. Now, I think that Groff really made a lot of the pronatal experience. It was his thing, if you like. It was what kind of made him famous. He thought that he'd identified a really important part of the human psychic experience that other people didn't. I think Groff probably was, and he was very interested in archetypal and transpersonal experience. He wasn't so interested in relational experience. He wasn't particularly interested in what happened after birth. He wasn't really that interested in the vicissitudes of, the infant's relationship with mother. I've worked with Groff. He wasn't that interested in the relational setting. So I think Groff's work has to be taken in context. He was a genius who cast a very sharp light on a certain element of the early experience, but in doing that, maybe there's an element of overstating that particular case, and maybe there's some neglect of the relational side of things that we think is so important in the current rollout of psychedelic work.